In this episode, we're going to be covering how the Quebec government is demanding that all the online streamers push French to the forefront inside of the province. We're going to talk about how the RCMP doesn't want anybody to protest the G7, despite the fact that everyone in Ontario is demanding better pay, higher income, and that the government do something. Now that the government has put forward an idea, everybody is complaining that the government is doing something. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Before we get to those stories, we're going to be talking about a coal exploration in Alberta. I got this from BNN Bloomberg. Alberta regulator approves Northback Coal's exploration project in the Rocky Mountains. Alberta regulator approved on Thursday a controversial coal exploration project on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. Northback Holdings Corp's project at Grassy Mountain was rejected in 2021 when the panel ruled that the environmental effects on fish and water quality outweighed potential economic benefits. The decision was reversed, and the approval grants deep drilling permits to Northback to go 150 meters underground in both public and private land in search of coal deposits. The company will not only be able to draw water from a nearby end pit lake that it owns, and that's not directly connected to other bodies of water. The decision notes that it's possible there will be some runoff from the lake, but it had been determined the project won't have any effect on the water quality or quantity downstream. If the existing waste rock piles are not elevated downstream selenium levels, it is reasonable to conclude that these exploration activities are unlikely to elevate selenium levels. The regulator was satisfied with the overall project's public interest, saying it would provide employment opportunities for nearby residents, including First Nations, while allowing company to continue investing in the area. Now, this is an important thing to listen to right here. We assessed the social and economic effects on exploration program and found it to be positive, adding the Northback plans to spend $2.5 million locally as part of the exploration. While the magnitude of economic impacts may appear modest, they are proportional to the program scale and duration. The decision says the company has spent over $1 billion since 2015 trying to advance the project, but that wasn't a consideration for the regulator. Coal mining companies have gotten in a lot of trouble for making water dirty, and I am quite sure that they have invested a lot of money in making sure that they don't make it dirty ever again, ever. So I believe that that's a thing that they were looking at, and that they had a whole host of scientists running all up and down trying to prove their point. I would just like to say that they're going to invest millions of dollars just in exploration, which is going to give people a lot of jobs, surveyors and support staff and whatnot. And then someone like Mark Carney is going to stand in the way, or Stephen Guilbeault is going to stand in the way of that money that they have spent for 5 years. Is that the kind of road to prosperity that we think Canada should be following? I mean, don't we want to stop asking ourselves how we're going to solve the problem of being poor and then allow everyone to get in the way of what will produce money? Don't we think that if we're going to be doing these projects, like imagine if the coal industry was just starting up right now, all of the water would get dirty, then they'd have to invest in technology, but they've already done all that. So now they've invested in how to clean water technology, and they've invested in technology that will keep the water from getting dirty. So my point there is that through this process, we have figured out better ways to harvest these products, which means that people get paid and there's no environmental impact. Now, I'll just start with the article. Trump will be coming to Canada to attend G7 summit in June, the White House confirms. Tension remains between the U.S. and Canada amid ongoing trade war, with Trump repeatedly calling for Canada to become the 51st state. First of all, I think the press is amping up this hatred for Donald Trump. But let's leave that aside. Let's just talk about the idea that no matter where the G7 is held, there's always protesters that come there. Like they come from all around the world that go to where the G7 meeting is, and they complain and they protest in the streets. They have placards, the whole thing. Trump coming this year is going to have an extra added element because of the trade war, that, or quote unquote war that he's having with Canada, and all of the people that are supporting the trade. And then, of course, the separatists from Alberta. Oh, man, it's going to be just a gigantic conflation of different opposing interests that will have absolutely nothing to do with the politicians behind the closed doors. The RCMP has weighed in on it, saying that people will not be permitted to have protests on the side of the highway. I don't know why. I don't understand their logic. I'm sure when the article, it might give us something. I just want to say out of the gate, though, that there are restaurants on the side of the highway. There are signs everywhere on the side of the highway. If you break down on the side of the highway, there's all kinds of things to do on the side of the highway, like you can look out the window, all of that. But for some reason, if a person stands on the side of the highway saying, I don't like Donald Trump or welcome Vladimir Zelensky or any form of complaint that they may have, this is a problem. See, what I don't like is this continued idea that they can, ever since the trucker convoy, the government has been trying to restrict where people can protest and how they can protest. It's a protest. It's not they don't need your permission to complain. They're complaining. And if you're going to allow people to block the highway for Palestine, then you have to allow people to block the highway for any reason that they choose. You don't have the right to pick and choose. And the second that you do turn it into a two-tiered system, you lose all semblance of order and all semblance of respect. You only have people who are going to now be embittered against you. Now, I know that there are a lot of people listening to me that don't need that explained to them, but there are people who seem to be making these decisions who obviously don't understand that. And I'm hoping that these words will reach them so that they will come to some common sense and stop thinking to themselves that some people are allowed to protest wherever they want and some people are not. And somehow in their mind, that's not going to create a lot of friction and hostility for the people being discriminated against. Now, some of the article, highway protests won't be tolerated during G7 summit in Kananaskis. Head of security says, RCMP-led group working to finalize demonstration zone location in Banff. The head of security for the upcoming G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis says his group is still working on the town of Banff for the precise location of a demonstration zone for protesters to express their opinions. But it's already been determined where the demonstration won't be allowed. On the highway, we're not going to be able to tolerate protests on a highway, Alberta RCMP Chief Super David Hall told the home stretch on Thursday. So I'm sure they'll find them a field out in the middle of nowhere and tell them they'll all be permitted to protest there. Of course, they'll be required to have their own transportation. They won't be able to use the bathroom, and nobody will be around to hear them complain. They already have a whole bunch of privacy zones, like it's built like the Davos, where you're not allowed behind this line without permission. It's really kind of totalitarian and imperialistic in its design. I don't believe that people should be limited on where they can protest. I don't believe that that's the kind of thing that, I mean, when we started, the far left would protest anywhere. They don't have any problem going into like museums and protesting. They don't have any problem sitting in the middle of the road and protesting. But all of a sudden, if people want to protest now, oh, no, you're not allowed to do it. You have to do it in our specific way. I mean, the epitome of control freak is telling a person how they have to complain. One of the problems that we have getting our military built up is that the liberals and the eco-mentalists don't want to allow anybody to take anything out of the ground. And if you do take it out of the ground, you have to smelt it specifically under the direction and the idea of the net zero people, which of course is just getting in the way and causing a lot of problems. If we were already established, I could see that as being something, but we're essentially a third world nation when it comes to these kinds of things. And we really need to just get the regulations out of the way. And that includes the Liberal government and Stephen Guilbeault and Mark Carney, who is a hardcore net zero, right? The world's #1 net zero champion, Mark Carney. As a result, we are getting offered to have other countries build our military equipment and some of our bases. In this example, it's South Korea. Links to the articles will be in the description. South Korea pitches Canada on a $20 billion plus plan for subs and armored vehicles. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs, and that pretty much should tell you the point of the article. A trio of South Korean companies have made a significant multi-billion-dollar pitch to Canada, promising to quickly replace the Navy's aging submarines, deliver more firepower to the Army, and help revitalize the country's defense industrial base. First off, a country as small as South Korea doesn't have the resources that Canada has and is offering to build us ships with our own material, right? We'll sell them the material, they'll smelt it, They are building their own smelter in Canada, in the United States right now, as well as their own power generating station. And that's just for their cars. Imagine how much of that material is started in Canada, but we can't do any of that in Canada, because we have eco-mentalists running all up and down screaming that if we bend a blade of grass. Meanwhile, in South Korea, a country that geographically would probably fit inside Canada 100 times or more. They're offering to build us 4 subs in 10 years. Hanwha Ocean and Hyundai Heavy Industries, which are the companies, submitted a detailed joint presentation worth 20 to 24 billion, promising to deliver the first 4 submarines by 2035, the current Royal Canadian Navy deadline to receive just 1 submarine. They're going to give us 4 in the time that we're going to be able to make 1. Now, if that doesn't just scream embarrassing, I don't know what does. It has also pitched building maintenance facilities in this country which would employ Canadians. I mean, the idea that they're going to come along, build our Navy, build our Jeeps, like our equipment, and to teach us how to build army barracks is beyond embarrassing. And I'm not trying to cast any shade on the South Koreans. They see a business opportunity. They're trying to go for it. I want you as a Canadian to see the difference, the contrast between a country that's not freaking out over every little blade of grass, who's not headed by the number one net zero flag bearer, number 1 and 2, right? Because we have Carney, who's the number 1 net zero guy on earth. And then we have Guilbeault, who's the number 2 net zero guy on earth, or certainly in Canada, getting in the way and interfering with getting our steel out of the ground and turning that steel into Canadian industry, into Canadian products, making a military that people want to join instead of a military that people are afraid to join. We have South Korea coming over here and saying, hey, we can fix some of this for you. Why do we have the longest coastline on earth and we can't make a submarine faster than 10 years away? What is going on with that? And we can't produce a submarine in a couple of years. We've got to wait 10 years. Never mind the frigates and the destroyers and all the other things that required that go. We have the longest coastline on earth and we don't even have a single aircraft carrier. I mean, this is embarrassing. And again, I don't blame South Korea. They just see a business opportunity. But I absolutely blame the federal government because there's no provincial government that's in the way of this. This is all federal. We need to change this. We need to turn this around, and we need to stop asking other countries to bail us out of our own predicaments that we got ourselves into. Now, I waffled back and forth onto which one I should do next, as opposed to which one I'm doing last, because I wasn't sure which one was going to make me rant more. I'm going to go ahead and try to do the French one first, because I'm telling you right now, I can't understand the absurdity of it. Quebec to impose French language quotas on streaming giants. New legislation takes aim at services like Spotify and Netflix. Now, right now, they're doing a whole bunch of CRTC hearings because in their head, they think that they can force these giants, these economic behemoths, to make movies inside of Canada and give them individually to different parts of the regions of the country. I mean, the lack of understanding in the CRTC of how the industry is working and functioning is profound. All you got to do is watch one of the hearings. I see a lot of them on CPAC, but you can find the hearings online on all kinds of places, and they bring in these industries, and then they're going to try and tell them that they have to do so much content. In this case, they want to have Netflix push French language content to the fore. Now, the absurdity of that is pretty severe for a couple of reasons. One, why would the French language not just uses CBC, right? They have CBC Gem right there. There's an ad for CBC Gem right here on this it's on 2 ads for CBC Gem on this very article. Why would Quebec, who's always talking about they want to save CBC, not use the streaming app of Gem? But mostly I want to understand why they would not just tell themselves that they would get the closed captioning or the languages modified so that they can dub in French. Right? Isn't that the solution that we should be talking about? I see Netflix. I see a lot of these channels. They have Punjabi on there. They got all kinds of languages on there. I don't watch any of that kind of stuff like in other languages. I'm unilingual. My French is not strong enough to follow along in most movies. And certainly I wouldn't understand Spanish or something like that. But I know that these languages are offered on these platforms because people somewhere, wherever they happen to be, are watching these programs, are watching these languages and these movies and shows from other cultures. Just like you might watch something from Britain or France if you're in Quebec or something to that effect. passing legislation which is reminiscent of Bill 101 and Bill 96 and all of the hateful, discriminatory, xenophobic French language laws that Quebec likes to pass is going to harm the business model itself. Did you know that when you want to buy a video game in Quebec, for example, a video game, the sellers have to wrap it in a French-only language material? The federal government passed laws saying that the French and English language must be on the labels at the same size. So Quebec, not being satisfied with that, demanded that the English language be 10% smaller than the French language. So for those of you that are not aware of the years of ineffective attempts by the Quebec government to force French onto the people living inside of Quebec, despite the fact that most of the people who are born French in Quebec listen to English music, watch English TV. The only thing they watch in French is the hockey game. They play English video games. It's all kind of a ridiculous thing. Now you want to have Netflix, who ultimately will not be able to accomplish this, or any of them, Spotify. You won't be able to find the content enough of it to push it forward in the algorithm. And this is what comes from messing with the algorithm, like in Bill C-11, Bill C-18. See, it never ends. It never stops. The government will always try to take control. And once they get a little bit of it, it continues to go and go and go and go. And the next thing you know, a company like Spotify is doing like Amazon and saying, you know what, we're leaving the province altogether. Now the people in the province don't have any access to it because the people that are at the top are trying to force an ideology onto the people at the bottom. The government in Canada has it backwards. They think that they are telling the people how they should live instead of listening to the way the people want to live. And that just sort of goes right from British Columbia right on through, because they got away with it for a little while and now they think they can do it all the time. I don't understand how these streaming outfits are going to be able to put French content to the fore when there's very little of it made. Certainly not enough to justify all of the costs of streaming into a province in French only. If that were the case, then explain to me how come the CBC is losing money hand over fist. Now, I'll do a different video on the CRTC and my ideas and thoughts on which way we should be going with television in this country, and I have many. And they are well thought out and well learned, if I may do say so myself. Nonetheless, I'm getting a little bit fired up because I lived in Quebec for a long time, and I know exactly the kind of scrutiny the French gives to people who don't speak any French. And I honestly don't agree with it in any way, shape, or form. I find it to be very one step backwards, and that's just to be polite. Okay, now we'll come to one of the most absurd things that I've heard of in a while. So Doug Ford runs around saying, I need to be reelected so that I can unleash the potential of Ontario and so that I can get the province up to snuff while all the money vacates from the south. And of course, he takes a couple of pages out of Pierre Poilievre's discoveries of the Ring of Fire and how most of the world is after these rare earth minerals, so much so that Donald Trump bargained with the Ukrainians to get a hold of theirs. And then all of a sudden he puts forward a bill saying, hey, let's tear it open. Let's get it done. Let's get it out of the ground. And out of the woodwork come all of the crazy people who just 5 minutes ago were screaming that they don't have a job, their housing is too expensive, they got no place to live, and they need some income, they need an economy, are now screaming, no, we can't do that because it might harm a leaf and bend a tree, though the trees and the grass both grow back. And they just want to get in the way and interfere. And then you wonder how we get into this position in the first place. You wonder why it takes 15 years, because people are, they just don't want to think about the best interests of others. They only want to think in their very narrow-minded approach to almost everything. I got this from CTV. Incredible. Doug Ford defends bill that would expedite critical mineral projects despite the criticism. Premier Doug Ford is defending his government's plan to move forward with a bill that might expedite projects around critical minerals and resources despite concerns around the environment and the First Nations rights. Bill 5, also known as Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economies Act, is introduced by the government in April. Can I just say, for the sake of on the side, that's a horrible name. I mean, somebody needs to, like in the government, they need to employ somebody to just name these bills, because leaving it up to them is just far too literal and it doesn't have any catch, The government says the bill would cut red tape and duplication in order to move along critical mineral and infrastructure projects, particularly in the resource-rich Ring of Fire. However, it says that it sidesteps or weakens environmental regulations and First Nations rights. The bill has also been scrutinized for promised creation of special economic zones that would allow the government to grant itself exemptions from other regulators. Now, before I get into what I disagree about with this, I just want to show you something from the main Google News. So this is what I looked like. This is what, when I went to dig deeper on this article, this is what came up, right? The Toronto Zoo warns of extinction. First Nations leaders want the bill to be struck down. Doug Ford defends his bill. Guelph rallies against Bill 5. Bill 5 will rise costs, undermine local planning, and put our community at risk. Objections to special economic zones pour in ahead of committee review. Ojibwe Nation heading to Queen's Park over Bill 5. Ontario using a tariff as pretext for speeding up mining projects. Regular viewers of the Canadian Shield know that I don't bring profanity into these reports, but I promise you that list of articles makes me want to. I mean, the idea that everybody would run around saying, oh, woe is me, everything is so hard, what are we going to do about it? And then somebody says, let's do something about it. We're going to take these billions of dollars out of the ground, make everybody rich, give everybody a decent life. We'll make some roads so getting material and getting food up to the north will be way better, way cheaper, much faster. We'll bring a lot of electricity with us. We're going to bring some cell phone towers. So everything will just be, better for the standard of living up there. And of course, private interest groups got to come out of the woodwork, demanding that they be noticed, demanding that they get in the way. Won't be long until somebody chains themselves to a tree, which I think we should just work around them, let them sit there on the tree. I mean, it's obvious that this is the kind of thing that is slowing down the productivity in this country. And we need to be productive. We need to get out of our own way. We need to have things unlocked, or you have to stop complaining. Like anybody from the First Nations who is around the Ring of Fire, who thinks in their mind that they're not going to be able to get a decent job and not going to be able to make a lot of money off the mining, is not thinking their way clearly through it. And if you think, well, I don't want a job with there, so I'm just going to stop everybody from coming up, well, then don't complain that you're broke. Don't complain that you don't have cell phone service. Don't complain that you don't have satellite service. Don't complain that you don't have decent internet or roads. Don't complain you don't have a decent school. Don't complain you don't have a decent hospital. Don't complain at all, in fact, because you're the one that's getting in the way of the progress. Progress doesn't always look like it does on the far left. Progress sometimes means that you actually have to improve things. And the only thing you can do for sure is know that they're coming up there to get those minerals out of there. They'll be there for years, so they will want their own cell phone tower so that their own cell phones will work. They'll want electricity. They'll want diesel generators. They'll want roads that can handle dump trucks. Will they be paved roads? Not necessarily, but probably not, as a matter of fact. But there's some roads to the left or to the right that you can convince them should be paved. Will the water be done? Yes, absolutely. Will they put in water treatment centers? Absolutely. They have to. They have to put in all of these things so that they can keep up with getting the stuff out of the ground. And they need guys that can drive, or people that can drive heavy equipment. They need people who are willing to go into the ground. They need people who are willing to transport it, because that's a different truck. A mining truck is a massive thing, and the truck on the road is different sized. And obviously, everybody needs to stop telling themselves that they're a special interest group and just get out of the way, get in line, put in your job application, ask for some extra money so that you can transport yourself back and forth to work or for a place to stay on site, and then just get going, bring in the economy, start to stimulate the money, get the growth going, take that money back to your particular village, particular town, make the town grow, get better, and all the rest of that, and do the things that other countries that are developed have been doing for hundreds of years. Stop telling yourself that you're a special interest group and start telling yourself that this is the solution to the questions and the demands that you've been making for years now. You're always inside of the different governments saying that there's not enough going on in the north. And now that the north is coming up, the government has decided to come up. You don't want them to come up. You want to tell them all of a sudden that, no, you have to do it. I want you to do it, but I don't want you to do it like right away. Let's sit around and complain about it a lot more. Let's see how much money we can get out of the press for them to interview us and tell us, so that we can be on the front page of certain newspapers, while other newspapers don't get seen on the internet because they're not part of Bill C-18 or Bill C-11. So they get turned way down in the algorithm. So it only looks like it's a one-sided argument. I suppose that's a different topic. All I can say for sure is that this makes us look like a bunch of clowns. And now here again, the words of Donald Trump ringing in my ear. Never say never. I mean, you have to choose. Do you want prosperity or do you want poverty? Because those are the two choices that are before you. Let me know what you think. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.